my name's Robin Lambert, I'm 21 years old and I have cerebral palsy, but you guys know me as the T-Rex and you're watching my T-Rex life. Okay guys, today I want to talk about the ambiguous nature of disability and the effects that this has for the people who have them. Now, what do I mean when I say disability is ambiguous? Well, if you've watched this channel before, you'll know that disability is the largest minority in the world. In fact, it's estimated that 1 in 5 people have some sort of disability. And with this community being so large comes a great amount of diversity. Disability encompasses so many different impairments, meaning that within the community, people get around in a bunch of different ways, they complete activities in a bunch of different ways, and they have a lot of different struggles. Disability is also not always visible, it's not always consistent, and it's not always the same from person to person who share the same diagnosis. So that's what I mean when I say disability is ambiguous. It can look like a lot of different things and it can present in a lot of different ways. And I guess for the wider public, this leads to some confusion. Because of this ambiguity, it's like the hardest word to say. Because of this ambiguity, able-bodied peers tend to project certain narratives onto disabled people and their actions. A lot of the times it's the ones we're force-fed by the media, including death with dignity, heroically overcoming adversity, and the disabled person as an inspiration. And this projection of narratives leads to a bunch of different scenarios for people with disabilities. The first one being the phenomenon named by Bill Shannon as gesture of help. Because people with disabilities are so often framed as victims, whose life is made a struggle because of their disabilities, people often feel compelled to try and help those who have disabilities when they're out in public, and often at times when they're just doing, activities that are mundane or simple for the person with the disability. And that's why Bill Shannon calls it a gesture of help, because often in the situation where an able-bodied person is offering help to a disabled person, it's either not needed or the able-bodied person doesn't actually know how to help the disabled person. And basically what they're doing by offering help is appealing to the humanity in that person, and they're basically attempting to say, I see your struggle. Which sometimes isn't a struggle, it's just the way we get around and the different way that we get around, and in that difference they see struggle rather than purely difference. And it can also lead to a bunch of awkward encounters for people with disabilities. Quite often when I'm out and about, people will approach me on the street to hear my story, because it is assumed that every person with a disability has faced some kind of tragedy and they have some kind of tale of overcoming adversity. My tale's not so exciting. I was born, that happened, and I was born with a disability. So there's not much to hear, really. Also, I get a lot of people approaching me on the street to pray for me, because in religion, disability, again, is framed as something that turns you into a victim and something that makes your life harder. Disability is seen as a hindrance and something that should be overcome in order to live a full life. So there's that. That's one way that the ambiguity of disability affects me in my day-to-day life. But if our presentation does not fit the projection of the narrative of the able-bodied person, then this leads to a number of other things. The first being staring. Now, personally, I believe that staring is almost a part of the human condition. People take in visual information in order to make sense of it, and if they see difference in someone in the street, then they are going to take longer to process that visual information as they try and make sense of it. So especially if you're a disabled person, that does not fit the idea in that person's head of what disability is. If they are not a stereotype of disability, then people are going to stare and they're going to try and make sense of that. And I'm not saying it's polite, I'm not saying it makes me feel good, I'm just saying I don't necessarily think that those people are... I don't necessarily think it's an inherently negative thing. I think people are just trying to learn and understand. But don't just stare at me like that in the street, because no one likes that. No one. Or they don't believe my disability, or they don't believe the substantialness of my disability. And that leads to me having to provide medical validation. It means that I have to indulge my medical history in order to prove that I am in fact disabled, and I need to occupy that space, whether it's an accessible bay in a car park, or whether it's a priority seat on a train, or whether it's an accessible toilet. I have to provide some kind of validation why I need that accommodation or that space. And sometimes it's not even for me to gain space. It's for, again, people to just understand. For people to understand my struggle. If I'm, if I need an employer to understand why I might need some certain accommodations, or if I need, when I was in school, I often had to provide medical validation in order for people to understand the way that I do things. And for me, I think what this all comes down to is trust. It's trusting that a person has the right to claim the disabled identity. It's trusting that a person needs to occupy that space. And it's trusting that if, a disabled person tells you something, they know best. And it's also trusting that disabled people aren't always victims or heroes. They're just people with a different physicality to yourself. And I think, as a disabled person, I think it's my responsibility to share my story, to educate others when I can, and to show people that, disability can't be summed up in a wheelchair symbol. Especially as a part-time wheelchair user, the ambiguity of disability is something that I feel a lot, because people's notions of disability is challenged when I stand up from my wheelchair. Or, when one day I'm walking around with no aids, and then the next day I'm using a cane, and the next day I'm using a wheelchair, and then one day I'm wearing AFOs. I think I constantly challenge that notion that everyone with a disability is the same. And that, a wheelchair symbolizes paralysis, and paralysis means that you can't move at all outside of a wheelchair. So, yeah. Let me know your thoughts, guys, in the comment section down below, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think that we need to do to help people understand the ambiguity of disability? Do we need to do anything? Is it our responsibility, or is that for them to figure out in their own sweet time? Let me know when you face the consequences of the ambiguous nature of disability. But most importantly, guys, remember to stay shiny, because I love ya. Sorry guys, totally forgot. Quick note. I am thinking about starting a Patreon. Which is, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a community app that allows people to contribute to your, your creativeness, and make a small donation every month in order to help you create content. I am hoping to use this money to create more videos, and I'm also hoping that it will allow me to write a short memoir of all of the essays that I've been writing recently over on my Facebook and my Instagram. Hopefully, something that will help people with disabilities to be more confident within themselves, and also to help educate family members, friends, so on and so forth, of people with disabilities. Just sharing the tips and tricks that I have learnt leading a life of 21 years with disability. So, let me know in the comment section down below if you would be interested in supporting me via Patreon, so I can get an idea of what you guys would want from me. I'm thinking that I would maybe write an exclusive blog post every month for you guys that have contributed, or maybe a newsletter letting you know everything that I've been up to in my sport and in my creativity. So let me know what you guys think, and again, stay shiny.